Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. I'm David Ebner with Merrill Lynch, and with me this evening is Pat Dunn, also with Merrill Lynch. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Good to be here.
We have an exciting show today. We're going to learn all about YouTube and social medias and all those wonderful things and how businesses can use that to their advantages. But before we get started, GDP's been in the media a lot now. We've been talking about is the GDP improving, is it not improving? What are some of your thoughts or some of your firm thoughts on the GDP?
Well, GDP has been particularly interesting this year, David, because the first quarter, we had a miserable quarter weather-wise, and that just slowed everything in the economy down. And the GDP figures that came in for the first quarter came in at an abysmal 1%. Now, the expectation is that the second quarter, spring, things are perking up.
Nicer weather.
Nicer weather. We could see GDP advance at 4%.
Wow.
In the second quarter. Now, in the second half of the year, they think things will even out and will be somewhere around 3%.
So low, high, low, average.
Average.
If you will. That's interesting. You know, what I always find interesting about GDP is it's constantly revised anyhow. Once they give us the number, then they revise the number, and then they revise the number, and then they revise the revision. So, but it'll be interesting. And I think you're right. I think what happened in the beginning of this, the East Coast really had a harsh winter. And it definitely affected, goods and services in that part of the country. So no question about it. What about, we're watching the stock market. Obviously, it had a very good year last year, but bonds, generally speaking, when stocks go up, bonds go down. But that's not really what's been going on here. It's almost like a tug of war between stocks and bonds. Sometimes bonds are up, sometimes stocks are up. What do you see in the future with the stocks and bonds?
Very interesting question. Right now, the stocks are telling us that they expect good economic times ahead. However, the bond market, when you look at that, that's painting a much bleaker picture. So, which is it going to be? Are stocks going to rise, or are interest rates going to rise? Are we going to have rising interest rates and falling stocks, or rising stocks and rising in interest rates? Basically, what we expect is that we think that growth is going to accelerate through the rest of this year. So we're expecting better markets for stocks. At the same time, we are expecting bonds to start declining because interest rates will start rising.
So if the economists are right with the forecast, and let's just say that they're not always right with the forecast, and the economy does pick up here in the second half of the year, and it may possibly stabilize towards the end of the year, the equity should have a pretty good year because the company's earnings will go up or continue to grow, and then I guess what I'm hearing is we're going to see a bit of inflation, and if we see a bit of inflation, we could see interest rates rise to offset that inflation.
Correct.
Okay, and that kind of falls in suit with Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve. They've talked. They're slowing down their bond purchases. We're probably going to stop bond purchases between now and year end, or maybe even the third quarter if they get aggressive here in the second half. And also, we know they're going to raise interest rates. It's a matter of when, not if, and it's probably going to be early 2015, at the latest late 2015. Do you feel the same way about that?
Definitely do.
Okay, yeah, and we could see that, which is really fantastic information, and people should, obviously contact their financial advisors before making any decisions on the information we deliver, because our show is taped. But we do have a question before we get to our guests. Our question comes from Jack Edwards of Philadelphia, and he says, is it time to get out of bonds? It's a great question to go with our little commentary.
It falls right into what's going on right now with the tug of war between stocks and bonds. And in answer to Jack's question, I would say, Jack, it's time to sit down again with your financial advisor. No financial advisor is ever going to tell you to not have any bonds. Bonds are a part of a well-diversified portfolio. But interest rates are a very simple animal. They only do three things. They go up, they go down, they stay the same.
Okay.
All right. We had a 30-year declining interest rate environment, and for about the past 4 to 5 years, we've been in flat interest rates. So what's left? Now, If you are an investor who wants to have a moderate approach to your portfolio, or a moderately conservative approach, or a conservative approach, this does not bode well when you go into a high interest rate environment. Because interest rates, I like to point out to my clients, have an inverse relationship to bond prices. When interest rates drop, bond prices rise. That means that the bond portion of your portfolio is having a positive impact on your overall return. When the opposite happens and interest rates rise, bond prices fall. So whatever portion of your portfolio is dedicated to bonds is going to have a negative impact on your overall portfolio performance. So it's time now to sit down with your financial advisor and redo the risk tolerance questionnaire to see if you can see your way clear to becoming a moderately aggressive investor, in which case your percentage allocated to bonds would be reduced. Now, since we're also at a time when baby boomers are retiring in great numbers, you say, I don't want to have less bonds because I'm depending upon the cash flow. Again, talk to your financial advisor about either having a dividend growth strategy where you can start to see the cash flow rise. You might be able to do that through a utility strategy. Or look for a total return strategy where you're using good blue chip stocks that happen to pay a decent dividend. Because maybe instead of getting all of your lifestyle from cash flow, you're going to start to need to get some of your lifestyle from appreciation, which hopefully you'll be taxed at a long-term capital gain rate.
With any luck.
With any luck. But it's not a time to be loading up on bonds. If anything, it is a time to be backing off, but not completely. I go back to, we're big movie fans in our house, and I like to refer to Pat Morita's line in The Karate Kid.
Okay.
And he says, Grasshopper, the best way to avoid a punch is not be there. And that's exactly how I feel about bonds.
Nicely put. Well, that's fantastic. And if you, that's a great answer to a great question. And if you have a question, please send it to Money Matters at 205 East Levering Mill Road, Ballackinwood, PA 19004, or to moneymatterstv@gmail.com. And we'll have an expert answer a question just like Pat did. That was great, Pat. Thanks. Well, our guest tonight is Steve Lubetkin, who's from Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here.
So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started your company?
Sure. My background is in communications, corporate public relations. I started in college radio. I always wanted to be on the radio.
Okay.
And worked that into working in commercial radio, and then I had a choice to make. You can be on the radio or you can buy groceries, but you can't really do both. So I left broadcast journalism and went into corporate public relations, where I spent 30 years of my career. And then about 10 years ago, found myself on the outside looking in, as many people do, and deciding what to do next. I'd always had technology as part of my practice as a PR counselor, and was just getting aware of what we called then new media, which we now call social media. And at the time, that consisted mostly of blogs and something called podcasts, which essentially were audio files distributed over the internet.
Okay.
And I started listening to what people were producing as podcasts and realized that it sounded a lot like college radio. There was a lot of amateur stuff going on. And I recognized that podcasting could be an important tool for businesses to use to communicate with their clients, with audiences they want to reach, but it had to sound more professional. So I set about relearning the skills that I had learned as a broadcast production engineer and as a broadcast news anchor to edit in digital worlds rather than in the analog world that I grew up in with razor blades and grease pencils on magnetic recording tape, which nobody uses, and getting the equipment that I needed to start making digital recordings for clients. And we started fairly successfully getting clients to do audio podcast recordings with their thought leaders, talking about the expertise of the company, talking about the ways that they could solve problems for their clients and for prospects. And fairly quickly after we started in 2004, 2005, people started asking about video. And at that point, video was just coming on the horizon as something that could be practically distributed over the internet. It was very hard to do, the bandwidth wasn't there,
Right.
and the devices for watching it, like the very first iPod, if you remember, that could play
Of course.
videos,
Of course.
cost about $600.
Right.
And we said to people, wait a while because the prices will come down, the bandwidth will become available. And sure enough, it did. And since about 2006, 2007, we've been producing substantially more video for clients. I have a full-blown recording studio, TV production, and audio production in the basement of my home. We do a lot of location recording for people. We do multi-camera video shoots. We do audio podcasts for several clients, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Excellent.
Well, from a business owner's perspective, and we have several business owners as watchers of our program, they're sitting out there saying, but Steve, I make widgets. Why should I have a podcast as part of my outreach to my clients?
Well, it's a really good question because most companies don't think about the demographic changes that are going on in the market where their customers are located. The baby boomers are aging out as consumers, and the millennials and the generations behind the millennials are coming into play with the disposable income and the jobs and looking to make purchasing decisions. Those generations, the millennials and the ones younger, don't do things the same way as the baby boomers did. And when I give talks to groups about social media, I put a picture on the screen of the yellow book with the fingers walking across it.
Yes.
And most people under the age of about 35 don't know what it is.
No.
Most of them have never used the yellow pages to find a business solution. Now, on the internet, you can't, as a business, get found the same way you get found in the yellow pages. In the yellow pages, if you wanted to get found, you called your company AAAA Exterminators.
First one.
And that puts you
First one,
at
yes.
the top of the list.
Right.
Yes.
That doesn't work in a Google search. What works in a Google search is to have useful, repeated content on your website. And that means, in particular, audio and video files, which Google gives a higher rank to in the search results. So if you post video and audio regularly, you will rise up in a Google search.
Huh, that's interesting.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. I want to stay on the social media because I'm intrigued by social media.
Everyone is.
Right, because it's out there but it seems like it's going through many incarnations. You talked earlier about Facebook but I have a 14-year-old daughter who's on Facebook, but it's not on Facebook. That's passé. That's what her mother does, if you will. And it's constantly changing. So how can these videos and podcasts are the wave? How do you know which venue to go in, or do you have to go to all the venues and hope for the best?
Well, it's interesting. The fastest growing demographic adopting the use of Facebook for the past several years has been women over 50.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that's where they have to go to see pictures of the grandchildren.
Interesting.
Because the days
Interesting.
of people going to the drugstore and printing out the pictures and mailing them to
To
grandma,
grandma.
it's over. Mom, go on Facebook. That's where I'm posting the pictures. But putting that aside for a minute, I have a contrarian approach to social media that kind of goes against what most of the social media consultants you might encounter will tell you. And that is, what a company needs is not a social media strategy. What a company needs is a content publishing strategy. There have been terrible, wrenching transitions going on. We see it here in this market with the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News,
Sure.
and the layoffs and the downsizing of basically all of the mainstream news media. What that means to most businesses is that unless, heaven forbid, you have blood on the floor or an executive being led out in handcuffs, you're probably not going to get your widget or your new business launch or your branch opening covered by the mainstream media.
Right.
And what that means to most businesses is you have to take control of the content publishing about your company, and you have to tell your company's story yourself using the same tools that the news media would use if there was a news media resource available to cover you. So that means producing your own video, producing your own radio shows in the form of audio podcasts, and producing your own written content, stories about your company, stories about your products and services, rather than publishing news releases that may or may not get published in a daily newspaper. And if you talk to, again, the millennials, most of them do not read printed news magazines or newspapers.
I would 100% agree with that.
They read their news online, and they don't get it from any one source. They're getting it from all kinds of streams hitting them.
Well, now the same maker of this widget who understands now he needs to have a podcast, he's not a professional in this area. How long should a podcast be?
That's a real good question, and the answer I always give for that one is as long as it needs to be. We've done podcasts for clients who specifically wanted something that was on the order of a 60-second public service announcement. So it was timed to be about a minute long, and that was for a specific purpose. We've also done podcasts for clients where the information content was very rich. It was a very long seminar on a women's health issue. The seminar ran about 2.5 hours. That's a very long podcast. Mm-hmm. We posted that on the web, and we've had about 4,000 downloads of that podcast because it was critical information for women confronted with this particular health issue. So depending on the content is where you decide how long it should be. Broadly speaking, though, 15 to 20 minutes is probably adequate. It's sort of the length of a good radio show. For people driving in their cars, it's easily digestible. They can listen to it while they're driving. And we do advocate that people listen to audio podcasts in the car, not watch videos. We don't think that's a real good idea. So,
well, let me piggyback on that question, how long, but how often should you change the content or change your story, if you will, or not change your story, repeat your story in most cases?
The story, it's actually additive, David. What you want to do is create a series of programs. The one mistake that a lot of companies make is they think, I need a video for my website, or I need a podcast for my website. That's not going to help much. First of all, if they do a single video, it's usually a, hi, welcome to my website video, which is not going to be terribly useful and not going to be watched by many people. What people want in a business podcast is actionable information. People who are lying awake at night trying to wrestle with a business problem. They wake up, they go to Google, and they Google the business solution. They're trying to find a solution to a specific problem. Producing audio and video on a regular basis, repeatedly, on different topics that your company has solutions for, is essential in getting you up in that Google search when that person goes on Google at 2 in the morning looking for a solution to a business problem.
Well, now, the contrary to that, is there anything that one should avoid in the way of content when it comes to a podcast?
Yeah, I have a couple of strong feelings on that, and if people want to visit my website, they can see some of the commentaries I've posted in the Lubetkin on Communications blog portion of the website. We have a list of 8 videos we think your company should never make.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I'm not a real fan of
Is that a
following.
growing list? Is it going from 8 to 9, 9 to 10?
It's actually going down, but I can
Okay.
talk about that in a minute. Broadly speaking, there are several different genres of videos that people tend to want to copy because they see it, they think it's cute, and then they go and do exactly the same kind of video for their business. One of these is what I call the dreaded lip dub video. It started with a video that the Today Show staff did in New York, where in a single take, they turn the camera on, and the camera follows people dancing along a set path in a single take. There's no switching, there's no editing with the cameras. And they're lip syncing to a popular song. In this case, it was the Black Eyed Peas singing I've Got a Feeling.
Okay.
And it was very popular. They showed it on the Today Show. It went on YouTube. It went viral, millions of views. And then every company in the world said to their marketing person, we want to do the same thing. And at last count, there were about 2 million videos of people lip syncing to the Black Eyed Peas. From an employee enthusiasm and morale standpoint, it may be fun to do. It consumes an enormous amount of time, and it can be expensive if you do it with a professional film crew. But it doesn't really move the needle for your business. And so you have to ask yourself, are you going to do it?
Business.
If you're going to do it for employee morale, it's great. But if you're trying to do it to boost sales, it's probably not going to help you in that way. The same thing is true, I think, of the so-called flash mob videos, which is, you know
Right.
the video. You see some puzzled-looking people sitting in a commuter train station, and someone gets up and starts singing opera, and then another person gets up and starts singing opera, and all of a sudden there's an entire opera company singing opera. And it looks very fun and spontaneous and unique and novel. And there are about 14 million of those kind of flash mob videos. And if you look very carefully, as I do as a professional, these are shot with multiple video crews, with multiple sound systems, with professional performers. There's nothing spontaneous about it. The original flash mobs were people going on Twitter saying, hey, let's meet and do a breakdance at the corner of Broad and Vine. You know.
Right.
And then 10 people showed up, and somebody with a cell phone took a video of it. These are professionally produced videos that cost a lot of money, and they're used for marketing purposes. Most businesses can't really do that effectively, and it's, again, not going to move the needle. What you want in a video for most businesses, particularly smaller ones, is a video that helps people understand what you can do for them with a solution for the business problem they're trying to solve.
So, well, is there a critical mass when we talk about small businesses? Because I can see a small business person watching this show and saying, hey, maybe I need to do this. But reality is they're too small, or, I mean, is there any size limitations? Because you're right about the Google search. My always, again, this is why I'm intrigued with this, is how do you get on that Google search? And if you search Google 10 days in a row, you can get 10 different results.
This is why we call it a content publishing strategy. It's an all-encompassing strategy that we think needs to start with your website. The website that most people have probably isn't designed in an optimal way to publish content. What we like to do is encourage clients to rebuild their website, and we do this for them, using the content management system known as WordPress. WordPress is particularly favorable to Google search. Google and its algorithms seem to like WordPress websites particularly, that it gives them higher scores in overall visibility. But when you use WordPress, WordPress was originally designed for bloggers, so it has a very robust tool for blogging. And what we try to encourage clients to do is to not worry so much about blogging. They hear a lot about blogging and they think, oh my gosh, now I have to give my opinion on the world
Right.
issues, and that's a burden. And for most people it is. What we say to them is use the blogging tool within the website as a publishing tool for news stories about your business. And don't hide them down on a subsidiary page in the website. Put them right on the front page, and you can do this very quickly with WordPress. And it's also very, very easy to use for publishing video and audio. And it works very smoothly. You can cross-post embedded videos from YouTube or embedded audio files so that people don't have to leave your website. And at the end of this content publishing strategy is where social media comes in. Once you have a robust WordPress-based website, and once you post audio and video to it on a regular basis, you can have the website automatically cross-post alerts to the social media channels where you think your audience is going to be. And what that does is alerts people on the social media platforms that you have some content that may be interesting to them, but it brings them back to your website to look at it. Remember, if you post the content directly on Facebook, for example, Facebook is what we call a walled garden. You can post stuff on Facebook, but it's like the Hotel California. You can never leave.
Right.
And trying to take your content out of Facebook at some future point is going to be challenging. If you post it on a website that you control first, and then tell people about it on Facebook, they'll come back to your website and they'll stay longer on your website.
So are you saying then once you've got the proper structure for the website, then like your smaller business owner, would he be able to do his own podcast?
Oh, they can, absolutely. And people do this, and they do it quite successfully, and some of them have even become internet stars by doing it.
Okay.
Gary Vaynerchuk is a good example. He started doing audio podcasts for his family's wholesale and discount wine business,
Right, in New
and he's
Jersey,
become,
right.
Gary V. He's now, the rock star of the internet with his videos and his books and so forth. So it's possible to go to that. That's an exception rather than the rule, but for small businesses, they can absolutely create their own content and create a personality for themselves and show off their expertise. That's what it's really about. showing your thought leadership in a particular sector, showing your expertise for solving particular problems for your clients.
At any point, does your content become too much? You know, if you're putting out a podcast on a monthly basis and you do that for several years, you have a lot of content. Do you have to do you have to edit that, or how does that work? And who works on that?
Yeah, most people leave the content up because, remember, people find your content by searching Google. Most people don't find your content by saying, oh, I have a problem with XYZ, let me go to the XYZ company website. They're going to look on Google and see who's out there. And they're mostly not going to go past the first or second page of a Google search, which is why this content publishing is so important. But once they find the content, they're not necessarily going to visit your site and listen to podcast 1 and then podcast 2 and podcast 3. They might discover the podcast you did 3 years ago about a problem that they're having now, and they listen to that podcast. For example, we did a series of podcasts for a trade association that deals with pest management issues. And there were about 14 podcasts in the series on different types of household and yard pests. Someone who's having a problem with, say, cockroaches is going to listen to the cockroach podcast first. But if they find that helpful, they might go back and listen to the hornet podcast. And they're out of sequence. They may not be the sequence in which the podcasts were published. So having a large body of content is a good thing, I think.
Interesting. I'm also intrigued on how people get to this because, like you said, I think people use Google also a little differently than you state. I think people already know what they want to go after, or what company they want to pursue or whatever, and then they search that company to get more information about it.
That's sometimes true, but again, if people are wrestling with a business problem and they don't know who has the best solution for them, they're going to go to Google and Google the problem. And that's why, you know, I can make any company show up very, very well in a Google search. If I Google my own name, I can sit back and pat myself on the back at all of the search results that have my name in it. But that's not how people find the solution. They find the solution by Googling the problem. So there needs to be some search engine optimization around the podcast to make sure that it shows up for the problem, not just for the name of the company.
I understand. It's very interesting and very intriguing, and I always find this. Every time I talk about social media, every time we have guests on talk about social media, it just seems that it's so vast, and it's almost like the wild frontier. We're still trying to get our arms around it, if you will.
Well, it's changing every day, every
absolutely.
week. And you mentioned that your daughter's not on Facebook anymore, and most teenagers aren't. Most of them are moving to texting and instant messaging apps of some kind, like WhatsApp. That works across multiple cell phone platforms. But, there's going to be something new and different every day. But the key thing is telling stories.
Right.
If you go back to 60 Minutes and Don Hewitt, the great executive producer, the legendary creator of 60 Minutes, when the reporters at 60 Minutes were challenged with what to do, he said, there's a 4-word formula for what we do. Tell me a story.
Well, with that, I'm going to have to wrap it up.
The same thing is true for podcasts.
We're going to have to bring you back and talk more about this.
I love it.
But that was a great information. Our next week guest is Mark Mahalit with the Matthew 25 Fund, and Mark's going to tell you a lot about his fund, which is a really interesting fund. You should take a look at it. We're also on Stitcher Radio and YouTube at Money Matters at Podcasts. So look us up, all right? Thank you, and your money matters. We definitely need to have you back.